Hi, I'm Rear Admiral Lawrence Selby, the 26th Chief of Naval Research. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video about the Office of Naval Research and to learn about our 75-year history. At ONR, we reimagine naval power every day. We know that the Navy and Marine Corps of today look very different than it did back in 1946 when ONR was founded. And we also know that the fleet and force of tomorrow will look very different yet again than it does today. The one thing we know for sure, though, is that ONR will continue to lead the way. I hope you enjoy this presentation.
The Office of Naval Research, 75 years of reimagining naval power. During World War II, the U.S. government established a very successful partnership with academia and industry to help ensure our nation's scientific and technical dominance over the enemy forces. To maintain that thriving partnership after the war, Congress passed Public Law 588 on August 1, 1946, establishing the Office of Naval Research. Its stated mission was to plan, foster, and encourage scientific research for the sake of future naval power and the preservation of national security. Today, 75 years later, the mission of the Office of Naval Research has not changed. For 7.5 decades, the Navy, Marine Corps, and nation have been profoundly affected by the countless innovations and discoveries nurtured by ONR. A pioneer in the fields as diverse as digital computing, directed energy, navigation, and our understanding of the oceans, ONR's contribution to the fight since 1946 has been incalculable, bringing together a wide range of partners in government, the military, industry, and academia in a collaborative environment. ONR has reshaped the ocean sciences by advancing our understanding of ocean dynamics and the transmission of sound, as well as developing new technologies that help explore the deep, improve the mapping of the ocean floor, and autonomously gather data for weather prediction. ONR supported expeditions, took humans to the deepest depths of the world ocean and to the highest balloon ascent in the early 1960s. ONR technology helped in the first detection of hydrothermal vents and a new form of life based on chemosynthesis in the 1970s, as well as the discovery of the wreck of the RMS Titanic in the 1980s. The groundbreaking Project Whirlwind of the 1940s and 1950s created the first digital computer capable of real-time computing, making it the direct ancestor of everything from the computers in our cars to the servers that monitor daily shipping traffic and air defense. Investments in directed energy resulted in the invention of the maser, an early form of directed energy in the 1950s. More than 60 years later, in 2014, ONR deployed the first operational laser weapon on a naval vessel. More than 60 years of support for the sciences of autonomy and artificial intelligence led to the first autonomous underwater vehicle, SPURV, in the 1950s, and the first autonomous robot, Shaky, in the 1960s. ONR is a world leader in the development of underwater, surface, and aerial vehicles that do everything from maritime data collection to mine countermeasures. From microsatellites, advanced sonar systems, next-generation anti-blast coatings and high-powered electronics, to advanced Marine Corps ground vehicles, autonomous medical care systems, and personal tactical energy technologies, ONR has provided the technological tools used by today's sailors and Marines. Today, by exploring and making advances in artificial intelligence, enhanced decision-making, networked sensors, and intelligent remote vehicles, advanced sea platforms, undersea medicine, directed energy, and hypersonics, ONR delivers the lethality our warfighters need to dominate and win on the battlefield, wherever the fight takes them. An essential custodian of the technological superiority that is the cornerstone of our national defense, ONR also provides the means for deterrence against potential adversaries. With its Naval Research Enterprise partners, the Naval Research Laboratory, ONR Global, and PMR 51, ONR has been reimagining naval power for 75 years, a creative endeavor fueled by innovation, discovery, collaboration, and diversity. The Office of Naval Research has helped create the Navy and Marine Corps of today and is helping to build the Navy and Marine Corps of tomorrow.
Wow, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Some of those images and stories brought back memories when I was a kid. It was July 1969, and my dad let me stay up late one night to watch the Apollo 11 astronauts step onto the moon. That event inspired me, like it did thousands of other young men and women, to begin a STEM career. In fact, Neil Armstrong was and still is one of my personal heroes. Today, the Office of Naval Research is making possible a safe and secure future for our Navy, Marine Corps, and nation. The fields we are exploring today will truly shape the world of tomorrow. We will keep our sailors and Marines dominant in the battle space, and our work will provide inspiration, just like that moon landing did for me in 1969. In fact, perhaps that should be ONR's anniversary slogan, stay inspired. Happy anniversary, happy birthday, ONR, 75 years. Amazing history, amazing track record. But I think it was Colin that said it, kind of what got us here is not necessarily what will get us there for the next 75 years. And I think we recognize that. And that's one of the reasons that I've started this phrase, Reimagine Naval Power, because I do believe that we're in a kind of a remarkable point in history, an inflection point, as it were. And it's driven by technological change. It's driven by economic change. It's driven by geopolitical change. It's even probably driven by all kinds of other factors that are outside of control, like climate. I mean, there's a lot of things that are actually kind of pushing at us in what I would consider an uncomfortable way. I think we all sense that. I think that in your personal life you sense that. We clearly sense that in the military as well. So Reimagine Naval Power, the way I like to describe it, it's basically trying to start with a blank canvas and painting on that canvas what you think the future should be, could be, should be, and then how do we actually get to it? How do we map a course to get us there? And I think that's what ONR does. I think we take ideas, we take technology, we take innovations, and we rewrite the rules of naval power using that technology. That's what we're all about. Rewrite the rules of naval power and write them in a way where we have a competitive advantage going forward. And that's what we're trying to do. And this is not just about things. It's not just about devices. It's also about processes. It's about STEM. It's about how do we educate the next generation of leaders? How do we ensure that the talent coming out of our school systems are interested in STEM and motivated to take careers in STEM? That's a huge area of focus for me and for others on this team here, is to make sure that there are others that are going to come up behind us. And we're trying to make sure that we cast that net very wide. We make sure that is a very diverse crowd of individuals that want to pursue STEM careers. And whether they work for me, one of the other services, industry, academia, I don't really care. I just want to make sure that if someone out there is interested in STEM, we find a way to get them excited about the work and find a way to help pull them across the STEM valley of death, which in my estimation is somewhere in about middle school, where kids lose interest, sometimes because they're not intended to be STEM kids. Got it. But oftentimes I think it's because they don't see people that look like them, or they're not excited about the career fields. And let me tell you something, we've got amazing work. That video showed a lot of it. I mean, the things we do are absolutely mind-blowing. So there is interesting work. There's a lot of it. We need you. So if you're out there and you're thinking about STEM as a potential career choice, think no further. I mean, it's time to go. Jump on and join us, because we got a lot of work, a lot of amazing things to do. Okay, so we are in a technological race. I think everybody knows that. If we're going to win, I think we got to make some adjustments. There's everything from structural changes that probably need to happen. There's changes on the way we think. Even the kind of systems that we want to field. There's a whole host of autonomous systems that we're getting into across the military, across DoD, really across all of industry. That is clearly an area of focus for a lot of us. That is a lot of reimagining naval power in my mind, is how do you bring those to bear in different ways, and finding things that, old guys like me would never come up with. Let's get a young sailor or Marine, give them some of these systems, put them in their hands and see what they do with it. And I tell you what, there's all kinds of stuff that you figure out when you do that. So it's an exciting time. I want to kick over to the panel here because our time is limited. So let me start off by introducing our panel. And we're very fortunate today to have two members of Congress with us. We've got Representative Sept from Massachusetts with us today. He was elected to Congress in 2014. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee and was a co-chair of the Future of Defense Task Force, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about here in a minute. Also served in the Marine Corps, so he's a Marine. And he did some service actually in Iraq. Also with us today is Congressman Mike Waltz from Florida. Representative Waltz was elected in 2018, is also a member of the House Armed Services Committee, and he was also a member of the Future of Defense Task Force. And he actually was in the Army, and he's still in the Army Reserve today. So both have served. Also with us is Brigadier General Ben Watson. Ben is actually my Vice Chief of Naval Research, and he's also the Commanding General of the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory down in Quantico, Virginia. Also on the panel is Dr. Jason Stack. Jason is part of the Office of Naval Research. He's a director for Ocean, Atmospheric, and Space Research Division, and he's recently served as a technical director for me, helping me manage the portfolio here at ONR. So with that, I'd like to give all the members of the panel a couple minutes to say a few words, and then we'll get into some questions. So let's go right to General Watson. Go to you.
Hey, good morning, Admiral Selby and everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity to participate. I was with the Commandant on Tuesday, and first of all, he expressed regrets for not being able to join us. He's in a symposium with all the Marine Corps' senior general officers this week off-site, and so unable to be here, but wanted me to extend a happy birthday, happy anniversary to everybody on the ONR team. So I really appreciate that. And of course, real honor to be on here with the CNR, and then a couple really distinguished, combat veterans and congressmen, as well as my good friend, Dr. Stack, who's been just really leading some of the DoD's thinking when it comes to intelligent autonomous systems. So thanks. I guess besides, I know we'll have an opportunity to talk later about the importance of the ONR to the Marine Corps in particular, and the strong relationship that we have, which is really embodied in the dual hat that I have the privilege of wearing as the Commanding General of the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory, but also the Vice Chief to Admiral Selby. I guess I'd just say, if you want to know how the Marine Corps is thinking about, the future of warfare, within the context of the Department of the Navy and the Naval Service, how we are thinking about sort of our piece of reimagining naval power, as Admiral Selby describes it, then you really do need to sort of go back to General Berger's Commandant's Planning Guidance. It's a little over 2 years old now, but if you haven't read it, or you haven't read it in a little while, it's really worth rereading. And he's built upon it, with a number of articles and publications over the last couple of years. And that's not, it's not a paid political announcement because, he's my boss. But the planning guidance, it's really thoughtful. I think it's clear, it's easy to read, and it's fairly compelling in terms of the way we envision the Marine Corps' role based on our assigned tasks, essentially out of the National Defense Strategy. I know that's under review, but we don't anticipate, radical changes as the new NDS is published in the coming months. But it talks about, really, kind of three things that characterize the current and future operating environment that are relevant to naval warfare. It talks about the kind of the mature precision strike regime and the wide proliferation of anti-access air denial tools available not just to peer and near-peer adversaries, but to kind of any dime store adversary, out there on the planet. I mean, you just look to places like Yemen and the Red Sea, and you see non-state actors implementing credible sea denial strategies. So challenging our long assured assumptions about air and maritime superiority. And then there's gray zone competition, right? Whether it's, hybrid warfare, proxy warfare, or gray zone competition, whatever you want to call it. But, something for which the American military, outside of maybe our special operators, not particularly well designed or suited for. But, you got little green men and maritime militias that sort of challenge our conventional assumptions and paradigms with this just asymmetry of interest and objective that make conventional responses to these challenges difficult. Is it really worth going to war, conventional war over small provocations? And then the confluence of all these things really in the maritime littorals, where the majority of the world's population lives. So these things are all interesting and are part of the lens through which we have been thinking about the future of the Marine Corps, within the context of the Naval Service. So I will look forward to questions going forward, and thanks very much for allowing me to take part in this.
Great. Thanks, General. I'm going to go to Dr. Stack next. And I know, Congressman Moulton, I think you're here. So what we're doing is just doing quick intro remarks before we take questions. So let me go to Dr. Stack, and then we'll come to you. So I don't want to catch you totally off guard, because I know that you guys are very busy. So Jason, over to you real quick here.
Hey, thanks, Admiral. Appreciate it very much. I'd like to join General Watson as well in saying welcome, everyone, and an additional thanks to our special guests. For Congress, we very much appreciate you coming and helping us celebrate the 75th anniversary. I'd just like to say very briefly, happy 75th to ONR, and a big party thanks to everyone who has been part of that family, part of the journey along the way. ONR has spent the last 75 years continuously reimagining naval power. And I just want to say a few words, but fundamentally, the way that ONR has been doing that is to take a long-term view and be able to see the future very differently. That's really how ONR does its business, by taking a long-term view and seeing the future very differently. And fundamentally, there's three attributes that allow us to do that. Number one, we are able to invest in things for sometimes years, but sometimes decades. The invention of the modern UUV is an example where we actually invested in the enablers for over a decade before those systems could actually come forth. And then what you have as a result is the modern UUV. You heard earlier about the maser and the laser, forming into the laser. And that's one of our additional attributes, is basically being able to invest in things when the conventional wisdom says that's never going to work. The laws of physics don't allow it, or it's just not practical. You're just never going to get there. But that's another thing that the Office of Naval Research is able to do, is to be able to place those bets, even when the conventional wisdom would go with a safer alternative. That's what brought us the laser. And then finally, and arguably most importantly, it's the people and the partnerships. It's investing in people, it's investing in the partnerships that not only produces the knowledge and the technology, but when we invest in people and partnerships domestically as well as internationally, it produces a community and shared values like academic freedom, openly publishing and sharing results, data, discoveries. And so those are some of the foundational things that we at the Office of Naval Research have been doing. So it's been a great and impactful 75 years so far, and I'm really looking forward to the next 75. Back to you, Admiral.
Great. Hey, Jason, thank you very much. Congressman Moulton, if you're ready, over to you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir. I got you.
And maybe even see me too. There we go.
Got you on video as well.
Yeah, I guess I can see up close now. I got to tighten my tie a little bit, but be ship shape. Look, it's an honor to be here. This is an important anniversary to celebrate. There's no question that we have been able to maintain our national defense because of a strong Navy. And we have a strong Navy in large part because we always have a technological edge over our competitors. I co-chaired the Future of Defense Task Force last year, the first time the House or Senate Armed Services Committee have really looked in a long time at where we need to be 20 or 30 years down the road. And there are a lot of conclusions we came to, but just to highlight a few that I think are particularly relevant. First, you've heard the Commandant and the Air Force Chief of Staff say this, but we are absolutely on a path to lose to China. We have to make changes. We have to make dramatically bigger investments in the future of our national defense if we even have a chance of keeping up. So we no longer have the luxury of feeling like we have a comfortable lead and we can afford to make a few mistakes here or there, or take a little bit too much time to invest in the next technology because we have some cushion. No, we're rapidly falling behind. That's really important. conclusion. Another is that we went into this with kind of two perspectives on what the real problem was with making sure we were adopting new technologies and getting them to the sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines out on the front lines. One of which was that, we're still stuck in the 1950s where we think that everything is going to be developed by government. And what we really need to do is just tap into the private sector and make sure that the private sector is adequately able to get technology to the services. The other view was that kind of at the root of this is just a lack of investment in basic scientific research. And you can see from a political perspective how it's generally Republicans who are always pushing the private sector, generally Democrats who tend to push more funding for basic scientific research. And the bipartisan conclusion of our task force was that we absolutely need to do both, and we need to do more of both. We do need to get more private sector technology expedited into the services. It's no longer just big defense contractors that are going to figure all our challenges out. But at the same time, we are falling behind in basic government research, especially when it comes to some of the technologies in the future that don't have an obvious commercial application right yet. So it's all the more to say that what you do and the innovation that you bring to our national defense and to the Navy in particular is incredibly important. And I'm proud to support it and proud to be here this morning.
Sir, thank you very much. Hey, sir, on that comment about how, the Future Defense Task Force talking about trying to invest more in technologies, trying to think further into the future. As you know, I mean, there's obviously a lot of today problems we've got. We've got very complex warships. We've got challenges with maintenance. We've got desires of fleet commanders to do things today or even in the next few weeks or months with those assets, which cuts into the ability to actually have the funding available to go focus on the future. Do you sense that that there's a change at the senior level, both in military as well as maybe of your colleagues, of maybe having more willingness to look at the future and actually try to start pushing a little bit more money towards those future bets, as it were?
Well, I think you phrased the question well, because I do sense there's a little bit of a change, but it's almost like you have to really, tune your senses to catch it, because I don't think it's nearly dramatic enough. And we have to come to terms with the fact that these are trade-offs, and we have to make trade-offs, including operational trade-offs, that have to be calibrated to the threats. And there is a lot of work to be done out in the world today. That's absolutely true. But I think that when you really step back and look strategically at where the greatest threats to our national security are coming from and will be coming from, we have to really reorient to focus on them. And that means taking more resources, more money, also more personnel to really invest in the future. China's clearly the pacing threat, and we're not going to keep up with China by just simply making sure we have a lot of ships in the South China Sea at the present day. We're going to keep up with China and hopefully stay ahead of them by actually making some serious resource adjustments to invest in the technologies of the future.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, sir. You mentioned the private sector, and the model clearly has shifted over the last 50 years, where post World War II and for several decades after that, the government was leading on the innovation space. That is clearly flipped. It's now private sector. We have some pockets where things are very uniquely naval or uniquely military, where we still do great things. But for the most part, the private sector is really racing ahead. And to that end, I think one of the challenges that we have within the current construct of our acquisition system is that we tend to want to try to define the thing we want to buy with requirements, and then we want to develop the specification and then go compete that for somebody to go build. When I think, to your point, sir, oftentimes there's a solution that may be on somebody's shelf in the private sector that maybe it's not the 100% solution, but it's maybe 80%, and maybe that's good enough. So I think we have to figure out ways to adopt different practices. And so to that end, I've got a little initiative I'm doing where I'm trying to actually define a problem. Instead of defining a requirement, let's go talk to the warfighters. Let's define the problem, and let's find a way to present that problem to industry and have them come with their solutions. So we're going to do a hacking event, we call it Hack the Machine event, actually in November, to do just that. But what will come out of that, I know, and I'm sure you can, your sense is as well, that there are going to be many great solutions. And then we're going to have to figure out, okay, how would you go do this? And that's where I think we're going to probably need some help. There are some existing authorities, and we can use things like other transaction agreements. But to the other point about most of the money is tied up in the big billion-dollar assets, we're going to have to find a way to put pressure on the system to, I think, move a little bit of that money, and it won't take a lot, into this other arena where we actually go out and either buy the private sector stuff as is, or maybe it's just a contract-owned, contract operated model where I just pay somebody to put a sensor in a box. I say I need a sensor in this box for this time period. If you can do that, we'll pay you to do that. That's a different model. Do you think that's something that other colleagues of yours would endorse?
Well, I think they'll endorse it after some convincing. I think that we all, people like you, people like me in our position too, have a lot of work to do to convince members of Congress that these are the kinds of changes that we have to make. And some of the incumbents that write them campaign checks or maybe employ people in their districts might not be happy with that. But we have to do this to keep up. I mean, just to sort of not to beat a dead horse here, but to reemphasize your point. It's funny you're talking about the difficulties of adopting literally off-the-shelf technology and this hacking thing you're doing. I mean, I'm staring right now in a House office building, House of Representatives, staring at an Apple computer. And our IT guy told me recently that he spends about 90% of his workday dealing with malware, with viruses on computers. But he said, you have all Apples. I've literally never had to remove a single virus in 5 years from your computers. Apples just tend to be more secure. So I asked Tim Cook yesterday, the CEO of Apple, and just to be clear, I'm not an Apple investor. I might have a better job than this if I were. But I asked him, why can't the DoD use any Apple technology where it's clearly more secure than Windows systems? And he said, well, actually, no, we are working on getting into DoD, and we've been working We've been working with them for about 2 years, and we're hoping that they're going to acquire some Apple products soon. Just think about that. They've been working with the DoD for 2 years to just buy a computer that you can get down the street at an Apple store. It's crazy. So we have a lot of work to do to reform the acquisition process. We have to be much more willing to take available technology right off the shelf. Sometimes things that are just literally on a store shelf a few blocks away. But we also have to recognize that some of the biggest technological challenges that we'll face with China come from things like artificial intelligence and actually biotechnology. People don't think of biotech as a real national security priority right now. But biotechnology is pretty soon going to be manufacturing things. I'm not talking about biowarfare. I'm talking about the use of biotech to actually create devices in the future. And China is investing very heavily in that. They're putting a lot of government money into it. It's very cutting edge research, super risky research, risks that the private sector is not necessarily willing to take on right now. I don't want to take money away from that kind of research when we actually need to plus it up. We just need to reform the acquisitions process to make sure we're able to get more stuff off the shelf. So the point is, again, we have to do both.
Yeah, yes, sir. And challenge accepted. So I'm going to prove to you this COCO model can work. So I've got a challenge going on. We're going to see what I can do in the next 8 months or so. And once I've got the results, I'll come back and let you know how it turns out. So
yeah, please do. And then we'll make sure my colleagues hear the story too.
Yes, sir. Speaking of your colleagues, I do see that Congressman Waltz is up. So Congressman, if you'd like to say a few remarks, I'll hand the mic to you, and then we'll just bring you into the questions. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, sure. I'll be very brief just to let you know, kind of where I'm coming at this from. Had the real honor to serve with Seth Moulton on the Future of Warfare Task Force. I've also served on Sea Power and Strategic Forces in that subcommittee, despite being a 25-year Army guy. I'm figuring out Navy acronyms in real time.
Good luck with that, sir.
Yeah, I know. They're long. But, importantly, I also serve as a ranking member on the Research and Technology Subcommittee on science, space, and technology that's really looking across a number of agencies and institutions. For example, we just reauthorized the National Science Foundation, which is responsible for 30 to 40% of the basic and applied research that goes on in our universities across the country. And then have been the Republican lead on the defense-wide RTD&E accounts for all the services and the defense-wide. So I know you wanted to focus on autonomous systems. I'll be brief so that we can have more time for questions. But look, the first shots in every war game now are fired in cyberspace, are fired in space, and are fired with autonomous systems. And as I'm sure that Representative Moulton's probably already spoken to, the next evolution is when we pair those systems with artificial intelligence, where defensive warfare becomes the advantage, because now we have AI and autonomous systems reacting to those first steps. And the real question is, I know think tanks and research institutions are providing volumes on right now, is where does the human then fit in the loop when the human becomes the slowest and weakest link in the loop? Whether that's the pilot in the Joint Strike Fighter dealing with a swarm of much cheaper autonomous AI-powered entities, or whether that's even in our command and control networks where the human again becomes the slowest and weakest link in the loop. So that's something I'm very focused on. But the other piece is with our adversaries' advances in space that our entire military is dependent on. Heck, our entire economy is dependent on right now. With their advances in cyberspace, it really then I think becomes a question of, can we go back to basics? Can we operate in a GPS denied environment? Can we operate? Sorry for the buzzing there. But can we operate in those various environments? Is our Navy going back to celestial? Can our infantrymen go back to his compass and have those backup plans? And then finally, in terms of basics, I think it's pretty relevant to what we're debating here in Congress. We have a massive infrastructure bill sitting before us, and I'm incredibly disappointed to see that not a dollar was requested for shipyards. Right now we have 4 public and about 20 private shipyards. We have a backlog of maintenance. We're retiring ships because they can't get the maintenance. I mean, imagine if you had to basically send a car to the junkyard because you couldn't get your starter replaced, or you couldn't get a tune-up because we're so deficient there. And those shipyards are approaching, some of them, 100 years old. Meanwhile, the Chinese are approaching nearly 1,000 and are cranking out ships at a rate of 5 to 1. The average age of their fleet is 11 years. The average age of ours is 21. We are falling further and further behind, and we're not making the basic investments to catch up. And then the other basics is we can talk autonomous, we can talk all types of advanced systems, AI, quantum. If we don't have the rare earths and the raw materials, and we don't maintain access to those basic ingredients, we're dead in the water. And among the many disappointments that I know Representative Moulton and I share on the policy on Afghanistan right now was the fact that it was sitting on $1 trillion of those rare earths, the world's 2nd largest known lithium reserves, 3rd largest known copper, 5th largest known cobalt, all of which we need to have access to readily before we can even start talking about how we integrate autonomous and demand and all of those other pieces. So I think we have some real fundamental flaws at just the basic levels of what we're trying to do. And we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves in some ways, talking about these advanced systems when we don't have the industrial base to produce them. And with that, And with that happy news, make everybody want to drink in the middle of the day, I'll stop.
No, that's good. No, thank you. Thanks for the comments, sir. Appreciate that. And your points about the industrial base. Clearly, with the complex warships we're trying to build, airplanes, whatever the systems are, there's high complexity. It requires an incredible skill base, incredible infrastructure to actually turn those systems out. And then, to your point, you then have to actually maintain those for the life of those platforms. And while that's what we're doing in that area, is we're trying to find other more innovative ways to do that are kind of maybe a little further ahead with science and technology. But to your point, we got to figure that out, because if you can't maintain the ships, they don't do you much good sitting at the pier in Norfolk. They've got to be somewhere forward to be able to make an impact. So one aspect that we talked about is you were speaking about Afghanistan. Let me just speak more broadly about technology that's being developed around the world in different countries. So part of my mission, I have an ONR global organization, which actually has an organization that sits in London, but I've got a very small presence with 1 or 2 science directors at different embassies or consulates around the globe. And they're there to actually see what others are doing in that neighborhood, as it were, but also to try to convince those countries and their countries in those regions that the United States should be their partner of choice when it comes to science and technology, because we do things like respect your intellectual property where others like China may not. We will actually invite you to our country to visit with our scientists, to see our laboratories, to do collaborative research. What are your thoughts, and I'll start with, I guess, Congressman Moulton, on more collaboration with our international partners, vice less?
Well, look, first of all, it's great to have my colleague and fellow vet, Representative Wallace, on here too. Mike, good to see you. And look, on this question, I think you and I will probably agree as well. We do need to have more partnerships, but we've got to be careful with them. Because obviously information security is a real problem. We've been burned by the Chinese primarily, but others too on that. And so we've got to be very careful about how we're sharing technology, but there's no question that innovation is going on all around the world, and we've got to be open to those ideas. One of the recommendations of our task force was that we think about a new generation of alliances around the globe. We've had tremendous success with historic alliances like NATO that just aren't as relevant today in today's world. I mean, we all support NATO. We wanted NATO to be strong, but NATO was really designed for the Cold War with Russia. And now we face much more of a threat in the Pacific. And we have the opportunity to build alliances around things like technology that aren't even in the traditional sense of geographic alliances, but just makes sense based on these priorities. If you think about some of the leading tech nations in the world, there are countries like the United States, Israel, Norway. I mean, these are 3 countries that are in different parts of the world. They're not don't share any obvious geographical connection, but absolutely do have a tech connection, and that's, I think, one of the things that we should explore.
Thanks, sir. Congressman Walton, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll just add briefly, because we are aligned on this, is, I think the fundamental question is, how do we keep research open and collaborative and engaging, where it is feeding on itself in a positive way, but also protected. And that's something on the science committee we've really are struggling with, frankly. I mean, it's a cultural issue in academia and research community, but it's often just a basic, IT and cyber issue. And what kind of, and then frankly, it's an enforcement issue as well. So for example, the IG and the National Science Foundation, the Inspector General there, has received 1,000% increase, 1,000% in referrals from the FBI on research theft, on grant fraud, and the vast majority of it was from Chinese or dual national researchers. But at the same time, their security office there to actually, to follow up or try to catch these things on the front end, the poor woman was an army of one. We've now given her a 500% increase and given her 4 additional FTEs, but it's still a drop in the bucket. So it's pernicious what's going on from the CCP. It's state sponsored. and they are essentially stealing their way to the top. If not through cyber, if not through research theft, then often through M&A. So in terms of the alliances, I think we're taking some good steps here in the United States. I think there's a growing awareness of the problem. But I've been raising this issue at the highest levels with our allies as well, and we need to press them to follow suit. I raised it directly with Prime Minister Netanyahu when he was in office, and they had legislation pending of CFIUS-like legislation. I just met with an official from the Norwegian Ministry of Defense. They just recently passed legislation on export controls and laws. So I think that needs to be part of, on the front end, our technology sharing protocols is really having transparency and a look at whether our allies have the protocols and the legislation in place, but also then the bureaucratic infrastructure. Because I can tell you we don't. We have those pieces in place, but it's completely overwhelmed by the amount of, particularly the M&A activity, and keeping our various lists aligned between Commerce, Treasury, and the Defense Department. It's a real challenge, but I think that's what we have to keep pounding away at and having our allies follow suit.
Yeah. Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Hey, one of the outcomes of the Defense Task Force was a recommendation to increase DoD S&T funding to 3.4%, as recommended by the Defense Science Board. Do you think that 3.4% should be at the average across the OSD level, or should that be at each service level?
It's a great technical question. I mean, look, my view is that we can't invest enough in this. But I do think that one of the challenges historically has been that we always sort of think of things across the board versus more targeted investments in places that are working. So we recognized in the course of this report that if we could start over with the Department of Defense, there's probably a lot of things that we would do differently. But it very much is like turning a ship in the middle of the ocean. It takes time. And so one of the things that we can do most immediately is just invest in the innovative programs that are really doing well. And in some cases, we should invest a lot. We should increase investments by way more than 3 or 4% in those particular programs. And in other places, we should deprioritize. But we don't want to just have, okay, everybody gets 3 or 4% more. We really want to be much more targeted with our investments. That's something that historically we have not done well.
Yeah, and also, as you also know, when pressures get tight, budget pressure gets tight, to solve a lot of the problems actually that Congressman Waltz talked about, the readiness problems, you tend to eat into that S&T funding, which if you don't do it in 10 or 20 years, you're going to go, well, why does China have this and we don't? And that's I guess that's the balance we got to strike. Just for round numbers, ONR's S&T budget 6.1, 2, and 3 in budget parlance is about 1.26%. I think that was the number from last year. So not 3.4%. That's just for SA. Congressman Waltz, if you want to chime in on any of that.
Again, just a quick add-on. It's yes, making those investments, but making sure they're rationalized. I'm still not convinced that the 62 labs under DoD understands everything that the others are doing. I know there are various mechanisms to collaborate and coordinate, but having those labs, having the various DOE labs, having the NSF, National Science Foundation entities, I think there's just more we could do to make those dollars a lot more efficient, frankly. And that's one of the reasons I'm pushing legislation to have a forward look and a broader strategy on our science and technology enterprise, not just in the defense realm, because we all know whether it's technologies coming out of NASA or NOAA or Department of Energy or just across the spectrum, we can all benefit. I think one of the things the Chinese are doing very effectively is their civ-mil fusion, and we could do it a lot more effectively on our end. And first thing is to direct that we have a strategy on what basic technologies and basic areas of research that we're emphasizing and investing in. And that, by the way, I mean, my committee has oversight of the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. That's a whole of government effort. And that's, in my view, who needs to drive it.
Yeah, great, sir. Great. Hey, as you look at the future, and I talked, I don't know if you were both on or not when I did my opening, I talked a lot about STEM and the importance of developing kind of the future STEM talent for this nation. And as I'm sure you're both aware, we just don't produce enough STEM graduates from our schools. And as a result, I cannot clear someone who's a foreign national. And so I need to do that. So we're trying to reinvigorate that. And any thoughts by either the congressman or anybody else on the panel on ways to really better reach students and to really encourage students to join the ranks of the STEM field? And again, it doesn't have to be for work for me. It could be for NSF or a private company or academia. It doesn't matter. But any thoughts on trying to reinvigorate STEM across the board?
Well, I'll just start with a few brief thoughts. I'd love to hear from the other panelists too. This again was a recommendation of our report, and we recognize that we've got to get more people, more students interested in STEM. I think they've got to see where these careers can lead, and you need to start a recruiting effort early. But there's a separate problem, which is simply making sure that STEM talent is actually willing to work for national defense in the name of national security. A very high-profile incident at Google a few years ago, where a whole bunch of Google employees refused to work on national security issues, and that's been resolved. And I think that it required a bit of an education effort to say, look, you may not agree with everything DoD does, but this is the national security of the world's leading democracy. It's far from perfect, but this is the best we've got right now, and we've got to make it stronger and safer and more secure for everybody, and everyone should be willing to have a part in that. One of the great bipartisan recommendations of this committee, an issue that Mike Waltz and I are particularly passionate about, is national service, giving more young Americans the opportunity to experience serving the country, not just in the military, but in programs like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, lots of different service opportunities. And I think that's a great way to introduce young people to the rewards of serving others and serving the country. And ultimately, that is going to translate into the ability to recruit more talented people in STEM fields and otherwise to places like ONR.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I'll just dive in there. If look, we have a massive workforce shortage. Most labor projections will show us to be 1 million jobs short in various STEM fields over the next 10 years. And where I've tried to address it on the front end, we just have a numbers problem. We have 11% of minorities participating in STEM and around 25 to 27% of women. It just doesn't add up to the workforce that we need. And we won't go down the rabbit hole of our immigration problems or policy problems to then try to address it that way. One of the issues that I've struggled with is the cultural issue that we've had experts testify before our committee that women often are dissuaded, research shows, in elementary or middle school from pursuing STEM fields, but yet the vast majority of our education professionals at that level are also women. So I think we still have some research to do to understand why people are taking those off ramps. I was really proud of a minority serving institutions bill focused on STEM that we were able to get through with the chairwoman of science and technology, but also to Seth Moulton's point, I think we have to link it with service. And so he and I and other veterans have worked on expanding junior ROTC in high schools, of mandating as part of those programs that they have various STEM components to them. And to make it more exciting and to make it more relevant to really the economy of the future. And then the final piece is it's not just the high-end science and engineering and kind of algorithm level mathematics. It's also in the problems in our technical trades and advanced manufacturing. and manufacturer after manufacturer that I speak to, particularly down in the Space Coast where my district is they can't find, and I say this in the most positive terms, they can't find those highly trained wrench turners that they need to create the manufacturing and the things of the future that we need. So it's not just the raw materials issue; it's a real workforce issue, and we're doing our best to try to get it at a root level. But I think it's some broader societal and cultural issues that we need to wrap our minds around.
Yeah, yes, sir. And to your point about the wrench turners, it's the same thing with like welders. I mean, trying to get skilled welders, and I mean, welding is very much it's an art, it's a science, and it takes a fair amount of time to get a welder proficient to the point where they can actually be doing like nuclear qualified welding or submarine type welding, and that's a huge challenge we've got as well. So, to your point there. Sir, respectful of your time, I think we've kind of at the point where we said we'd let you go. But if there's any last comments or anything you'd like to say to my Naval Research Enterprise, marking our 75th birthday here at ONR, Congressman Moulton, over to you.
Well, just that you obviously have a very proud past, but we're really counting on you for the future. What the kind of research that you do, the work that you do every single day is essential to our national security, and that's essential to the future of our country. So we're proud of you. Keep it up. Keep innovating. Keep questioning assumptions. Keep challenging each other, and challenge the rest of the DoD to be thinking innovatively as well. Yeah,
thanks, sir. Congressman Walz.
Well, as a proud Army officer, I'll say, congratulations on this 75th anniversary. And even though I have that Army bias, at the end of the day, we're a maritime nation. Florida has 14 ports. We import 30% of the nation's food supply overseas through those ports in the winter months. We are completely and utterly, totally dependent as a nation, as a modern economy, as a leader of the free world on the research and innovation you're doing to keep those sea lanes open and free and fair for all nations to enjoy, and the prosperity that the world has enjoyed, the relative prosperity since World War II. Free of great nation conflict is due in very large part to the innovations coming out of your office that feeds the world's greatest Navy. And our job in Congress is to put the legislation and the policies in place to help you keep it that way. So thanks so much, and it's really an honor to be with you today.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you, Congressman Moulton, Congressman Walz. Really appreciate your time. I know you guys are incredibly busy. I know you got some important votes to get done today, so appreciate that. So thank you very much. Team, with that, I'm going to kick it over I'm going to ask my other panelists to give me a couple minutes each on kind of their recollections or reflections on ONR and anything that they would like to say. Let's start with Dr. Stack, and then I'll go to General Watson. So Jason, over to you.
Hey, thanks again, Admiral. So no, great discussion so far. Really appreciate two distinguished members of Congress that are extremely supportive of what we're doing. So definitely appreciate their time. So actually, I'd just like to pick up on this last point and talk for just a second. This issue of sort of basic research protection, STEM, and whatnot. As we look back over the history of ONR. More recently, in this past decade, we've had a couple of milestones that typically don't make the front page news because they're not widgets, they're not pieces of technology. But for example, we had an ONR research vessel make port in Vietnam, and that was the first time a U.S. research vessel has made port in Vietnam since the Vietnam War. We also had one of our ONR research vessels do the same thing in East India. And that was the first time since the 1970s that a U.S. research vessel has made port in India. Now, those actual instances in and of themselves are not the main point. They're not the value. What's extremely valuable is the work that went into that was decades of partnership and collaboration. And again, sharing of values. When we talk about things like, basic research and research protections and the kinds of things that the congressmen were just talking about. We've had the ability, we have a very good understanding of our traditional challenges of how to separate open sharing of knowledge that is useful to the entire community, that should be out shared with the world, versus things that have specific military utility and need to be a little more restricted. That is actually well understood. Today's challenges, though, provide us an additional complication of also making sure that science remains open, that science itself, that what we deem fundamental research still is allowed to be open, and that is a more complex. It is a more complex issue, especially internationally. But when we do these things, when we partner with these other nations of the world, we share our values. There are actually disproportionate advantages that we get just from that boots on the ground interaction of scientist to scientist, and sharing those values of openness. And free sharing of data and discoveries, and all the things that are required to innovate tomorrow. And there's also a huge, again, disproportionate payoff from the STEM perspective. Our investments in things like student competitions, for example, where we do competitions with underwater vehicles and surface vehicles and different robotics competitions, very disproportionate effects in terms of getting the word out and exposing to students of all backgrounds what STEM is, what it's like. In fact, Admiral Selby, even your former Lieutenant Aide, right? He came up through one of our robotics competitions, was exposed, joined the Navy, and once he got out, stayed in the community. So again, a lot of amazing gains to be made there. So let me just conclude there and turn it over to General Watson.
Great. Jason, thank you very much. General Watson, over to you.
Hey, sir, thanks. I know we're about out of time, so I'll keep this brief, but I think, what a great opportunity and how appropriate to celebrate the anniversary with those two gentlemen, again, both combat veterans and really, thoughtful members of Congress on this. I guess I'd say, the Marine Corps, we think your focus on people is really appropriate and incredibly important as a part of reimagining naval power. The diversity of the workforce, the focus on how do we continue to encourage young men and women to become invested in the concept of national service, and in particular through a STEM education as a way to do something honorable in the service of your country. It's not just about joining. There are lots of ways to contribute to national security and to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And that's not just to wear, a uniform. And I think there's a rich discussion to be had that are going forward, and one I think we can also learn from, as the services, to include, the Marine Corps, need to change the demographics of our workforce, of our people, to be consistent with the technological sophistication of the equipment with which we are manning them. So I appreciate the opportunity to listen in on that a little bit and just to be part of the conversation today. Again, really honored to be part of the team, and happy anniversary to everybody at ONR.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Okay, so let me just give a couple personal reflection here of kind of what ONR means to me. And so as a kid growing up, kind of up and down the East Coast, lived a little time in Baltimore, up in New York. I can still remember being woken up by my father in July of 1969 when I was, I think, five and a half or something, to watch Neil Armstrong step on the moon. And I was probably already a science kid before that, even at 5, but that cemented it for me. So that one act of humankind stepping on the moon just lit a fire that just continues to burn today in my soul. And it's what I'm about. I mean, I saw that it wrapped in exploration, technology, humans working as an amazing team to do what no one has ever done, and probably, I don't know if we'll ever do it again. I mean, we'll get to the moon again, but I mean, something of that magnitude, that was just absolutely mind-blowing. And I even recognized it as a 5-year-old. And that led to me really just loving science and knowing that I wanted to do something in the science, a STEM type field. And so that continued. Obviously I I got the bug to be a submariner somewhere in high school when I met someone whose dad was a submariner. I learned all about these amazing vessels that could go underwater for months at a time, nuclear power, and I knew. And so I'm like one of those rarities who kind of, even as a high school kid, kind of made a statement that I'm gonna be a submariner. I'm gonna command a submarine one day, and that became my dream. And I get this now say that I've actually lived my dream. And I know not many people can say that. And when I say that around my wife and kids, my wife's always kind of like, okay, you're just, you're weird. She might say, you're different, right? Maybe I'm weird, but I'm different. And I get it. I understand that. But that fire was lit. I went to UVA, and I can still remember, this is the ONR connection. I can still remember going to one of my professors. It was a material science professor, and he was doing research. I was going to get help with a problem set. And in his office, there was a sticker. And it was the Office of Naval Research sticker. And I saw that sticker, and I go, what's that? And I was a Navy midshipman. I was a Navy RTC guy, but I didn't know about ONR. And I said, what is that? He goes, oh, that's Office of Naval Research. He said, I'm actually doing research for them. And I'm doing research on the corrosion of the bow planes on the improved Los Angeles class submarines, and how we're seeing all kinds of issues because of dissimilar metals. And he showed me what he was doing, and I was just like, wow, there's an organization that does this. And that just kind of got filed in the back of my head. I wouldn't say I at that moment said I want to go work for ONR one day, but it was in the head. Okay, so then I fast forward, I'm now in the Navy, and I'm a submariner doing my career thing. And there were different points in time where I had intersections with ONR. It wasn't, like a major thing, but I would run across somebody who was either working for ONR or a submarine was doing something where they were giving data to ONR. And so I was aware of it. And then when I was the executive officer of USS Connecticut, we had a rider, and the rider was Jay Cohen. And Jay Cohen knew my skipper, Fritz Rogie, retired Vice Admiral Rogie now. They had worked together when Fritz was at OLA, Office of Legislative Affairs. And so he knew Jay from that. And so Jay Cohen was on board. He was the chief of naval research. And he stayed in my stateroom. XO submarine has 2 bunks, and that's where you always get the senior rider. So he stayed in my stateroom, and we had some just great conversations about ONR and all the amazing things we're doing. So at this point, I'm now a lieutenant commander, commander select. And so now it's more real in my head. Hey, that would be some cool place to go one day to maybe work. And if I was ever hit by the lightning bolt to become a flag officer, wouldn't it be cool to have this guy, Jay Cohen's job one day? Okay, so that actually did cross my mind, just so you guys know. And then fast forward, I did make flag, and I'm doing the first job was a Naval Surface Warfare Center commander job. And I used to send out like a monthly, it was a weekly. It was an update of some sort I'd send out. And I blast to a bunch of the flags. And Matt Winter was the chief of naval research. And he would always reply back to me with really huge encouragement. Oh, this is awesome. And we're doing this together. It's fantastic. So again, I'm like, this is this CNR guy. Anyway, so I had many interactions as a program manager, of course, with different CNRs, coming over here for program reviews and whatnot. But when I was at One Star, I still remember Admiral Richardson, when he was Naval Reactors, brought me in and said, okay, Selby, how's it going? What are you thinking about for your future? What do you want to do next? And I said, well, I kind of like this Warfare Center gig. I wouldn't mind doing this for a few more years. And then I would love to be that chief of naval research guy. I think that'd be really an awesome job. And I think it fits my personality, fits kind of my background. And he said, oh, that's interesting, Selby, but I want you to go be the Chang. I'm like, the Chang? What? So anyway, that's a long story. But then I did the Chang for 4 years. But then when I got done with that job, obviously I'm here. And so this is in some ways a dream of mine. I mean, so again, Neil Armstrong on the moon, and to this day, science kind of kid, focused on technology. And I ended up not only living my dream as a submariner, but living my dream, as doing something that I'm passionate about for my entire career. And I think I'm done. I think this is my last time. Who knows what's next? But if I am done here, I will be done a naval career, which I can be very happy and proud of, and very proud to end it here with all of you in the Naval Research Enterprise that I am just so honored to lead, doing the amazing things we're doing. We got so much more to do. Reimagining Naval Power is not just a saying, it's a thing. We're doing it. And the men and women of this organization are the ones that are going to make the next 75 years even better than the last.
Shipmates, CNO Admiral Mike Gilday here to help you celebrate the Office of Naval Research's 75th birthday. Since 1946, ONR has been at the forefront of innovation. You've laid the foundation for the first digital, real-time computing systems, invested in groundbreaking directed energy research, and helped create the first autonomous vehicles and robotic systems. While technology continues to evolve, I know we can count on you to stand and deliver for the U.S. Navy, our nation, no matter the challenge. Thank you for all you've done and all you will continue to do to support the warfighters of today while imagining the Navy and the Marine Corps tomorrow. Thank you, shipmates, and here's to another 75 years ONR family.